Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be largely a speculation video on a single piece of information that has been dropped upon us, that Act 7, or as they would like to call it, let's get it up here, is Book 2 Act 1 Beta. So that is going to be the new official name of what effectively will stand for Act 7 in Marvel Contest of Champions. Now, I particularly do not have any kind of like big reservations of them simply changing up the names and going back to Act 1. That's perfectly fine. And that is what we're going to discuss. The fact that the beta is going to go live, I believe, on 5th of May. So that is very soon. That's 3 weeks away from now, basically. And that also means that the idea how the game is progressing has been definitely altered and is changing. And it's certainly something to note about, because I also believe that will affect the rewards. So today's video, we will have like 3 main talking points. The first one that we're going to start off with is going to be the timeline and what does it kind of means and implies. Second bit is going to be speculation on the rewards and the nature of the rewards themselves, and also the difficulty of the content. And third one is kind of going to be the hopes and expectations, and hopefully the things that they have learned from Act 6, because Act 6 was a slightly, well, what am I trying to sugarcoat here? It was a shit show starting from 6.2. 6.3 was a bit better. 6.4 was what 6.2 was supposed to be, in my opinion, and 6.1 is overall all right for start of it, if it wasn't for the controversial 4-star ban, which also made community pissed off. So throughout the Act 6, effectively up until the 50% mark, everybody was really unhappy with it. And 6.3 and 6.4 were kind of like increasing. 6.3 still wasn't quite as good of piece of content that I would have hoped. And only reason people do not hate on 6.3 as much is because 6.2 came directly before it. But either way, so let's start with the main idea of timeline. So the timeline here is very simple. It does not seem rushed if you have noticed what Kabam has been doing in a recent year or so. It's the fact that every other month, pretty much, we have had something big drop in the game. I believe this is one of the kind of like first month when we have had nothing, but they were effectively alternating in between things like new chapter of Act 6, new variant, and that was for vast majority how 2019 was filled. So they were effectively bombarding us with a high end game content, and I love it. It is definitely much more interesting. It's definitely much more kind of like accelerated progression options with all of this increased amount of permanent end game level content. There are many more options how you can build your account if you are a progressing player. You have so many choices now because you have 4 different variants you can tackle. You can go, for instance, let's say you have just gotten Cavalier and you have done a single completion of Act 5, maybe explored first 2 chapters. But then you have so many choices to decide whether you want to go back to Act 5 and explore it fully, whether you want to start exploring Act 6, but because that's where the better and bigger rewards are, even though I personally believe Act 6 rewards are still lacking for what it is requiring of players to do. Then there are variants which are, I think, unanimously agreed upon to be the best piece of content Kabam has produced, especially starting variant 2 till 4, because those are definitely fun and nowhere near as challenging as Act 6 chapters 2 to 4. And yeah, so now there is a lot of variety where you can spend your kind of attention, time and resources at to progress your account. And that is what I'm always kind of all for, the choice and as much choice being given to players. And I enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed the fact that they speeded it up, because we had to wait well over a year for Act 6 to start coming out, opposed to when Act 5 finished, and then there was like this huge piece of kind of quiet. And I think it was a wasted opportunity by Kabam, and I think they have realized that, and they are accelerating the release of their content, because the game is growing. Despite what everybody says, the game is growing, the game is doing well and has always done well and continuously steadily increases in its revenue and stuff. So all of those things being considered, I do expect Act 1, Book 2, to roll out to public as a content probably at July or August, because typically it's about 2 months since the beta test for the content to go live, if past examples have been any indicators, especially for like these initial chapters. Later on, the beta tests can be with a smaller gap in between the actual release of the content once kind of Act 6 keeps going. For instance, I believe 6.4 beta was about a month or a month and a half before the content actually dropped, so on and so forth. But in this case, I think we're going to have about 2-month gap, so I kind of expect Act 1, I'm just going to call it Act 7. For the purpose of the video, I'm going to call it Act 7. So I expect Act 7 to drop probably in July or August, which is kind of cool. So that means that we're probably going to get in another chapter before the year is over, and we're going to be well in our way progressing there. And that also, in my opinion, means that since Kabam quite confidently now has adapted that idea that every month or every other month there should be a big permanent piece of content dropping, that next month we might possibly be expecting something else in the month of May, and that would leave kind of like a gap in June, and then July possibly we're gonna get Act 7. So maybe we're gonna see a new variant dropped. I'm not too sure Kabam intends to keep on pushing out variants, because it's well, they are fun, they are great, many people do love them, everybody loves them pretty much. But I do not think that they want to end up in position where there are like 10 variants available with kind of like same set of rewards, and especially because variants currently all are kind of like designed to the same difficulty level and also designed to the same reward level, and they do not increase over time. So seemingly to everybody, it definitely seems that each passing variant that Kabam is releasing is so much easier than the previous one, because, well, in fact, they actually have, in my opinion, decreased the difficulty and the length of them. And additionally, our rosters keep growing so we can tackle them easier. And I do not think that it is within Kabam's plans to kind of like have 10 variants or 15 variants out. I think they will definitely stop at somewhere in between 5 to 10. But that's just my guess. Perhaps I don't. Again, this is just a speculation video, not based on any real information, aside from the fact that now we know that Variant 7 is, sorry, not Variant 7, Act 7 is coming. Right, so there goes the part about timeline, right? Now we can move on to the next and possibly the more juicier subject of what I expect rewards to be. So, rewards, because typically a release of new act has always kind of signified and implied a new progression level in the game. It has always been, hey, since pretty much Act 4 finished, because Act 4 finished, that was the first and the only way how people basically at that time could get their first rank 4 5-star, and then for a considerable amount of time it actually was basically kind of like the one choice you had to live with for a while, because you didn't really get access to additional rank 4s outside of doing Labyrinth of Legends or buying all offers for quite a while. And that was also pretty much exactly the same kind of case with Act 5. When Act 5 finished, we got access to our first Tier 5 basic catalyst, and that meant we can take up one champion to rank 5, and that was a choice we had to live with for a while, because we did not really get additional Tier 5 basic fragments that freely back then, and we didn't have alternate for Labyrinth back then as well. That was important to note, because there was no additional influx, and any new rank 5s kind of came gradually, either via AW initially, later on AQ also started adding Tier 5 basics, and so on and so forth. And Act 6 was the first act that kind of broke this chain, because when Act 6 finished, people already had rank 3 6-stars, because Kabam had way overdone it with offers. And that is one change that I definitely didn't like, and I still don't like, because typically like these release new acts was, and conclusion of a current act was also kind of like a moment of celebration, and that kind of signified that you are progressing into a new level of game, new progression level, and new highest ranked champions available. And in this case, they kind of broke that streak there, so I wasn't happy about it at all. But all that being said, it still kind of delivered you with that one full Tier 5 CC, some additional shards, but just before Act 6 had finished, we already had Abyss of Legends, which in total awarded you with 3 Tier 5 CCs, as well as some people had just formed them from offers that I mentioned. So what does it mean for Act 1? Well, mainly I do think that we will not see rank 4 6 stars. Maybe, and that's very speculative, maybe at end of Act 1 we're gonna get one, but I do not think so. I do not think that any of the rewards will include these new tier 3 alphas and whatever else is needed, tier 6 basics, I think, because in this time they have to introduce 2 new research simultaneously. Previously it was just the one type of catalyst. This time it's going to be 2, because 6 stars require tier 3 alphas and 6 stars will require tier 6 basics. I know it's getting out of hand now, I think. And additionally to that, we are still extremely fresh in the rank 3 6-star territory. And here is a major difference why I do not think Kabam will open the rank 4 level of 6 stars in this game yet. It's because when Act 5 finished, we had to wait well over a year. Within that year, we had time to accumulate our resource and progress more naturally into this next progression level. It wasn't the fact that we're just living with one rank 5 at the time Act 6 dropped. Many players who had explored Act 5 and had been keeping active at the day Act 6 dropped already had multiples of rank 5 champions. And it was because obviously the offers for a year accumulated and let you rank some more champions. It was because AQ and AW rewards had accumulated and let you rank up these champions. And at a time when they were opening this gate up, there were already kind of like a decent, well-established base of a maxed out 5-star roster, for instance. The people who finished exploring Act 6 definitely had like multiples of rank 5 5-stars and rank 2 6-stars at their disposal. That all being said, I do not think we're going to have quite as much time this time to get our rosters kind of like up to date with the top progression level. And that will simply mean that I do think that Kabam is accelerating the release of the top-end content. But at the same time, I do not think that they will drastically speed up the top level of progression, and we will not get stuff like tier 3 alpha catalysts, so on and so forth. But on the bright side, that does mean that we are much likely looking at many more 6-star awakening gems, or at least several more. We're probably looking at tier 5 class catalyst selectors and full ones this time. Probably looking at 6-star signature stones and quite many 6-star shards or some other stuff like that. So what I think the difference here is going to be that instead of opening a gate to the next level of progression like Acts typically had done, I think it's going to culminate with us having access to a larger pool of current height ceiling progression level, which is rank 3 6 stars. So that is my personal kind of like expectation of Act 6, because otherwise Kabam would be increasing the overall progression levels in the game extremely drastically. And judging by the fact that rank 3 6 stars scale up much more moderately to how rank 5 5 stars did back in the day, and judging by the fact that the timeline is so increased, but the rewards of Act 6 overall were lacking compared to Act 5 if you kind of pushed it to the next progression level, I do generally think that, no tier 6 basic catalysts and tier 3 alphas are coming. Additionally, because that would kind of make Abyss of Legends a bit underwhelming in terms of rewards already that quickly after its release, and Labyrinth kind of held its ground in value and stood for kind of like guaranteed rewards for several years. And Abyss has just come out, and if there's going to be a piece of content in the game that kind of like is designed for even higher level progression, that will definitely de-incentivize people go and explore Abyss. So yeah, that's my idea. I think there's going to be quite a lot of resources for taking champions rank 3, so on and so forth. But I don't think we're going to see rank 4 6 stars at the end of it. But that's just my initial progression. Again, it's just a speculation. Somebody is bound to come back to this video a year from now and tell me how wrong I was. maybe, right? And now the third installment is kind of like hopes, expectations. And I think we can actually expect a quite good but challenging piece of content. And I am quite cautiously optimistic that the quality of upcoming Act 1, Book 2, because Kabam seemed to have learned their lesson from 6.2. Then they did make 6.3 somewhat better. 6.4 was definitely better creation than previous 2. And so that kind of means that they did adapt to what people actually do like. Obviously, there are a couple of BS lanes and BS nodes and some extremely specific stuff like those Do You Sting path and the Pros path. But overall content as whole was much more accessible to more of your roster, because 6.2 was extremely specific and kind of like pipelined your incredible huge roster into small section of what actually could be used because of those 4 champion gates, basically, that required you to bring in 4 mutant champions or 4 6-stars or whatever. And that was a huge fail. That was a huge fail because effectively you had to funnel all your account, all your ranked up champions in some very specific lane and hope that you have good answers there for the problems that Kabam provided, and they did not hold back. All of those gated lanes were hard, were difficult. They didn't seem that, oh, there's a decreased level of difficulty. There was the same or high-end level of difficulty that you had on ungated paths, and addition to that, you only had access to 1/6 of your roster. And that was well out of line. Then with 6.3, what many people didn't realize, that did kind of a very similar thing with those overjacked nodes and boosts, where you actually could realistically only bring very small select groups of champions for most part, and you also had to utilize these boosts, and those boosts also worked with a small select group of champions. So even though it wasn't kind of explicitly stated, you can only bring in, let's say, tech champions, but the nodes of the lane and the boost that affects only one class effectively did the same thing that gates did, just with few exceptions where some utility champions could still be used and so on and so forth. So you had tiny bit more options, but still vast majority of gameplay was effectively restricted by a metaphorical invisible gate of a class and a utility boost that you had to rely on or were heavily encouraged to rely on. Now, additional downside effect of that was the fact that you had to know and get yourself acquainted with all of these boosts, and it initially definitely seems extremely underwhelming because it's a piece of information that you have to memorize. There's a lot of information about these boosts, how they work, which classes they affect, where you are supposed to use them, and most importantly, it's an information that you will never use again in the game because these boosts are kind of like a one-time thing. So overall, as a concept idea, it definitely failed in my mind, and it also kind of made Act 6 unnecessarily specific. If they hadn't went with the whole boost idea, the nodes wouldn't be as jacked as they are, because the thinking in Kabam's mind is, or was in my opinion, that you can make really jacked up specific complicated node combinations and then provide answer via these boosts that people have to use. But that also implied obviously that you had to get yourself acquainted with all the information, and that was just tiresome, bothersome. It made the game feel more like a puzzle or a homework, and the fights were so over the top that many of them just straight out felt unpleasant like to play. Now 6.4 moved away from all of that crap, kind of like went back to the pure idea of here are the lanes, here are the nodes, here's a mini boss at end of each lane, and that's what you're gonna have to deal with. There are no special boosts, there are no gates, and that worked out so much better in my opinion, because the clear structure of it also made it a lot more kind of like simple, and you knew what you had to do as you were exploring. Every time you were exploring, you wanted to check the global nodes on the lane, you wanted to check the mini boss, see what kind of additional nodes it has, and wanted to make sure you have answer for the boss. And it was like relatively straightforward, simple, kind of like here's the problem, find a solution within your roster and go fight, rather than cross-fix match all sorts of boosts with what you have available with what you need to achieve. And that was definitely a lot more successful and enjoyable, and I think overall, especially largely thanks to the good fight design of the Grandmaster, 6.4 is universally much more beloved chapter than any of the previous ones, because it's challenging, it's fun, it's interesting, opponents are jacked, but at the same time they're not as specific as 6.3, and there are no gates as 6.2. So that being said, I do have quite high hopes for Act 2, unless something goes drastically wrong, unless some little wanker has a brilliant idea to try something new like these gates again or something else. Now, I'm not trying to discourage Kabam game developers from innovating new ideas and functions, so on and so forth, but that is also how a lot of their tragedies and catastrophes have happened. So currently I'm definitely hopeful, unless they try to reinvent the wheel that works extremely well for them right now, and they have like a perfect blueprint of how to carry on in 6.4. I do think it's going to be cool. I can't wait. I'm very eager to see any beta footage. I'm not holding my hopes up for being invited to beta myself, but I definitely look forward to seeing how it actually is made, created, designed, and how specific and with what kind of base ideas Kabam is going to approach the topic. Now, I believe I have kept you guys long enough, and with that, if you still have made it to the end of the video, then here is a sexy gizmo. Not many people know that he is pretty much the OG Baby Yoda. Now, if you do not like Gizmo or Baby Yoda, well, then something's very wrong with you and you ought to be slapped. All that being said, I'm done for today. Hope to catch you guys soon. See ya.